report.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. And let's have introductions, since there are a couple of new faces here today. I'm Dick Olmsted, and I'm Jared Treeford.
Dr. Brugel, retired forest ecologist
Vice Chair.
and right here.
And Marty Vernon, tree board member.
I'm Larry Goldman. I'm on the city council. I'm the liaison to that board.
I'm Mark Phillips, and it's my first meeting as tree board member.
And I'm Riley Vishal. I'm the assistant planner and the administrative duties for the chamber. And Scott Morris.
And I'm Sandra LeVar, a tree board member.
Scott Morris in the hands. Turn out. We're just interested neighbors.
Is your interest in becoming members of the tree board?
No, actually, we're on the core team, and so we, for SR 522 project, so we just here just to hear from you guys.
Okay. I don't have a short reflection. Anybody else want to offer a reflection on trees? Begin the meeting. I think that was something that Steve started, and it remains on the agenda, but we often don't have one. Adoption of the agenda. I have only to add that we will be talking about the PowerPoint that I sent you, Riley, which is planning for tree mitigation replacement and having to do with the transit plan. Otherwise, I have been extraordinarily busy. My final exam yesterday. I have about 4 o'clock this afternoon. I haven't done much.
We often have printed versions of that agenda here.
It's usually there is.
I should get on my devices.
I always print my copy for myself after Riley sends it around. But Riley, it would be good to have some printed copies for visitors and for members who don't. It's a pretty bare bones agenda, and I suspect it will be relatively short. Riley sent around the minutes for the April meeting. It was sent today.
No, that was just for you.
And then
I'm on there to, because I need to share your vacation, so let me get myself.
yeah, if you could put up the agenda minutes, that would be great. Could you? Oh, that's right. We can't. You can't just.
I can.
Go ahead and share screen. Thank you for.
But I need to record the minutes, so like right now, so I couldn't share the screen unless we're doing a teach.
Oh, so you can't be recording and sharing screen.
And be on.
Can't you allow somebody else to share the screen?
Could join the meeting.
Yeah, if you want to join the meeting, yeah, that's for sure.
I'd like to. Can I amend the minutes now? Sorry, we can talk about it. It says in the minutes that I said the sound barrier might not be that strong, but I think I really said was that I thought 100,000 feet was way too wide for the corridor, which would be quite different.
Okay.
The draft we were looking at with the corridor 1,000 feet or more on the side of the road. I thought that was probably trees being planted 1,000 side of the road, we're going to help solve the problem created by the.
What helps solve the problem, but
trees being planted 1,000 feet from the road aren't really gonna help very much in solving the problem.
I had a question about that. The sound damming. Proper term. Sound damming property of tree corners.
Yeah, I thought that was.
I don't think it's
I
DAM.
thought that kind of,
Damping.
You're probably correct.
yeah, makes sense.
I think damping with a P
Probably,
is,
I probably just. Okay, I'm noting the sentence.
Any other comments about the minutes? Motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
Agreed, second, go right there.
All in favor? Keyboard, Sandy, can you, speak? Oh, yeah, I can see you now. Yeah, good, thank you. Minutes are approved. Or agenda is approved, sorry. Oh, no, minutes are approved. The word adopt approved. We never did adopt the agenda with a motion. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? The next item on the agenda is citizen comments, and for this, anybody who would like to speak, can have 3 minutes. What? Do you say anything?
You know, we just joined the core team,
Okay.
and so we've only been there for a week and 1 day, and so we don't have a lot to say as of now. We're just trying to suck up the information.
Right here from the tree board?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, well,
Yeah.
Riley? Riley?
If you want me to share the presentation, can you email it to me and then I can share it off my computer?
Did you have something you'd like to?
I'm
share?
listening tonight, but our property is very much impacted by all of this, so I'm just.
Okay. And our.
Another core team.
Okay. And would you like to make a citizen comment?
I don't think so. I'm just here to observe.
All right, well, we're moving right along.
One attendee, whoever RMS is, if you'd like to give a public comment, just use the raise hand feature and we'll click your public comment. Under attendees. If they want.
RMS, would you like to introduce yourself? And if you have something, a comment, now would be the time. If you hear us,
Oh, hi, this is Randy Sabanga. I am just going to observe tonight, but thank you for the opportunity.
Randy, could you spell your name?
Sure, it's RNDI. The last name is SIBONGA. Nice to see all of you.
okay. Communications, next board meeting will be June. I'm not sure what the actual date is. It's July 5th. July 5th, okay. Day after 4th of July. And at 7 p.m. here. Or online. Are there any announcements? Crowley, do you have anything? Hannah is not here either, live or on, by Zoom. Then moving along to old business. Shall we? I think the main thing that we wanted to talk about tonight was developing a plan for tree mitigation. We still are a little uncertain what resources we'll have or who is going to be responsible for planting and so on. But one of you can put that PowerPoint up. Doug and I have each done a little bit of research on opportunities that we think might be available.
Actually, before we start this, I thought Hannah said she was gonna have somebody from the city or somebody from transit here this week.
Yes, the people at Sound Transit, were able to answer the question, they didn't do it sufficient to this meeting because they were just able to answer.
So, who, let's take that up now, 'cause I was not aware that we had been given the opportunity to present them with questions.
Give me about 4 days to do it right after the last meeting. Like that.
Okay,
Some questions and answers. So it has.
yeah, so Hannah sent us some answers, questions and answers, and but I must have missed that.
And by the time I got around to putting some questions together, the 4-day deadline was already gone, which I thought was really very short.
Yeah.
A week, a month to that meeting, so. So I would just assuming we'd be able to ask questions here from the farmers tonight.
Yeah, I think that
And I would still
the
like. to
opportunity
do
for
that
back
next
and forth also.
month, but next month then.
So we might,
Sandy,
want to go back to Hannah on a follow-up with additional questions. I saw that the 2 that I submitted were there, but it was a pretty short list. So I was a little surprised. We should definitely maybe be a little bit more proactive about actually forwarding questions this time and request a follow-up.
I think the opportunity to meet, in person offers a better opportunity for us to learn about the issues than just submitting questions, because I think we're still at the point where we don't know what questions are relevant to a certain extent.
Before you get into your discussion, would it be helpful for me to kind of give a more like big picture perspective of where kind of the city council wants to go on this?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So
That would be good.
currently we're looking at retaining walls here, retaining wall ordinance. We're going to be discussing it, the retaining walls tomorrow. We're going to have another public hearing for that on our June 15th meeting. And then the plan, which we talked about on Monday, is to then take what we get from the public hearing and vote on an ordinance on June 22nd. That's the current schedule. And then once we get retaining walls done, then we'll be pivoting to trees. So the thinking is, if you, the tree board, can make some recommendations and vote on those by the end of tonight, we can present those because the council's going to do at our work session tomorrow at 6. We're going to be discussing trees. And then at our main meeting at 7, we'll be discussing retaining walls. So if you can provide some feedback, my understanding is exact timetable to be decided, but late June into early July, we'll be pivoting to this tree ordinance about the right of way tree mitigations. There will be a public hearing. I believe it'll be sometime in July. That's my understanding. And then the hope is sometime in July, maybe early August. And it depends on how quickly Sound Transit's looking to move on. Submitting my understanding is they'll be submitting 90% designs in June. And then at some indeterminate time shortly after that, they'll likely start submitting actual applications to build and permits for the whole, every aspect, whether it's trees, retaining wall, doing type stuff. But all of that. So once they've done the 90% plans, they'll likely be starting to submit. So the plan, the city council is very interested in adopting this ordinance that would explain how trees that need to be removed in the right way can be replanted around the city. So we're looking for feedback from the tree board. At the same time, that's the council's ordinance. At the same time, city staff are still, they're frequently negotiating with Sound Transit about the exact plans and can we cut down the, probably not the right choice of words, but can we reduce the number of trees that need to be removed? So that's happening kind of at an administrative level. What the city council is doing, and that's what you'll be discussing tonight, is what are going to be the official rules. If Sound Transit needs to cut down X number of trees, how many trees do they need to replace? Where do those need to go? So that's kind of the perspective of what we're looking to get feedback from you. What does that ordinance, what do you recommend that it looks like?
We gave you that feedback last month.
Planning Director Steve Bennett was here, so he gave us some feedback. He didn't officially vote. I wasn't sure if, as a board, you wanted to have an official vote so that you were speaking. with this is the voice of the board. Whereas last month was more of an informal, here's what each of you thinks as individual tree board members. I will leave that to you if you feel that kind of your individual feedback is sufficient, or if you would like to make official recommendations. If it's, I would encourage you, I think, because we are looking to move, I don't know if there will be, I don't know the exact timetable, but I would encourage you, because the city council will start to discuss this in earnest. So whatever feedback you can get me tonight, I will be sure to pass along to the rest of the council. Any questions for me before you start your presentation?
I think we may have questions as we go along. How's that?
Is the draft ordinance and still the same thing we looked at last month?
Yes. And if you were to look, if you go on, and Rodney might be able to send that to everybody, but if you go onto the agenda for tomorrow's city council meeting, there's the agenda packet, the PDF you download. That packet has the current version of the ordinance. City council sort of given some feedback. We'd love to take tree board's feedback on board, along with public feedback.
So you think it might be different than what we looked at a month ago?
There have been some minor changes. I think overall, I think in terms of policies, I think the big issues to consider are what should be the priority. So if trees are removed, what is the priority ranking for where trees go in terms of in corridor, public spaces outside the corridor, certain neighborhoods? I did show, sorry, Doug, which of you did that map? I showed that at a council meeting. They very much liked it as sort of like a concept, and so they're very interested. Oh, the map of like with the 4 numbered boxes.
Yeah.
The council was very happy with that as sort of like a first draft of where trees might go outside of 5 corridor. Yeah, so that's sort of an overview.
The thing I felt most strongly about that issue, and I actually would like to have a tree board recommendation, is that the corridor width be narrowed to 500 feet or actually 300. There's 500 feet too. I just don't think trees park 4 blocks away in the corridor, 4 blocks away from the street are going to help anything, except any more than they would in some other neighborhood.
So that was, I think, one key thing the council wants some recommendations on. Another one is should there or should there not be an in lieu of fee for sound transit? So I think those are kind of 2 key issues. Corridor width is a third issue. So if the tree board's interested in having a discussion, then vote on those and whatever else is in the presentation, that council will be appreciative. And I'll turn it over to you now. That's your meeting.
That's actually really what I kind of wanted to ask the arborist, but what they would rather do, they rather pay in lieu of fees or planning. We don't have arborists here, so.
I mean, I think the way I would like to approach it is think about priorities for the tree planting. And I think the number 1 priority has to be reestablishing trees in the areas that were, directly impacted by the construction zone anywhere immediately adjacent to the corridor. I presume that Sound Transit will have responsibility for all of that work.
I have something germane to that.
Yes.
So we did some research. What the city of Shoreline did, they actually had Sound Transit do a contract with the King Conservation District. And so my understanding is the King Conservation District would be doing the legwork if that's something that's very much in your wheelhouse. And I wanted to gauge interest. Is that something that you'd like to see for like if we can like Forest Park and Sound Transit could contract with King Conservation District to actually kind of do the plantings and contacting homeowners, that sort of thing.
I think that would be ideal because we don't have either the staffing or the capacity as the tree board to be doing that. And if they are able and willing to do that on a contract basis, that would be great.
That would apply pretty much no matter where we're sending trees.
Okay, so I had actually sort of forgotten about that map that I had put together that I showed the last meeting. Whatever that was. So it's not in this PowerPoint that I just put together here. So the first few slides are what Doug had put together to look at, so the first priority would be immediate adjacency of the impacted zone. And that, you know, it sort of speaks to itself. And that's where there will be areas impacted by the construction that are not going to be paved, right? And when the project is over, there will be the adjacent areas that will have it impacted. And those will be, I think, our highest priority for tree planting. Is that same?
I see that also as an effort to make the affected homeowners whole as much as possible. You know, somebody's cut 20 feet out of your front yard, we'll plant as many trees as we can to reduce the further impact of your house. Whatever we can do.
It might be that a second, I agree with that, a second priority might be within the X distance of the project. And I think, like Doug, that 1,000 feet on either side sounds like nothing. Like a bigger range maybe than was necessary.
So how, does anybody know how big shoreline they did that same model, right? Where they, up to a certain distance from the light rail, they were providing trees for homeowners.
It's really not the same thing, though. I mean, light rail is up in the air or some basis. It's a much bigger operation than one additional lane is already there. But I don't know if the analogy is very good.
Well, I think the light rail through shoreline is at surface level.
Still, it's an entire new train track, not just one.
Yeah, although it's just immediately adjacent to I-5. So I think there's an appropriate analogy there that they had to remove a lot of trees to put it in. And they're taking as method of mitigation, giving homeowners up to an area about 4 blocks away from the light rail to be eligible for neighborhood tree planting.
Again, 4 blocks away from the light rail is different from 4 blocks away from the street. I think that's most of what I'm saying. To me, 2 blocks is slightly different.
Yeah. So, you know, that might be something like that as our second level priority.
Within some distance, then if it's not immediately, if the planning is not feasible immediately at the site, then I think within some area, some distance from the site, and maybe it should be more like 500 feet. Rather than 1,000. I mean, a third priority is anywhere you find it, that thing is.
Well, so what the rest of this presentation really is where we might think of as third and fourth priorities.
That's it.
Marty.
I just had a question. Where's noise in this? Maybe that's why there's different areas of it. Because streets and highways and trains.
Well, I think that's part of the mitigation is to reduce noise. That's certainly with the retaining walls, having ivy or something on it also will help reduce noise.
And for context, at our meeting on the city council meeting on Monday, we did spend a fair bit of time talking about noise and to what extent the retaining wall ordinance should it just be sort of a general statement that Sound Transit needs to show how they're mitigating noise? Should it be much more specific in terms of, you know, show the specific techniques that you're using? So that I think is a topic for the city council to continue talking about. For the retaining wall ordinance, I don't think it's as germane to the right of the tree ordinance. But it is something that we'll likely be talking about tomorrow and then the public hearing on the 15th.
And
I'm not as concerned about noise personally. And I live one block away from this, but it's already noisy. It's a 4-lane highway. It's a 4-lane highway. It's actually, hopefully it's actually going to reduce the traffic on that line. Not much, but it's really not going to increase the noise, except in the sense of moving a little closer.
the retaining walls have the effect of bouncing noise.
Make a little bit of that.
But going farther.
Broadly, I don't see increased noise as the biggest impact it's had. I see. The right, retaining walls is much bigger impact.
Well, I think that the idea of having a area peripheral to the right of way, which there's a priority for replanting or planting, won't be replanting there because those are in properties that won't be directly impacted, but who may want to have trees in order to have noise mitigation or simply one of our community goals is to increase canopy cover, so that homeowners don't necessarily view their property as part of a community project so much, and that's where education, I think, will come in. In fact, I think that neighborhood that's above 522 to the west, it's a neighborhood that's going to be a hard sell for planting additional trees because it's you escape the disrupted by trees. Okay, but I think that's an appropriate priority. And have a corridor. It's 500 feet. I can't visualize 500 feet very well, but
2 blocks.
2 blocks is that right?
2 blocks last year, yeah. And I stood at the intersection of Lake City Way and looked, I could see 4 blocks from there.
Yeah.
That's where I got my idea that 4 blocks is really a long way.
Yeah.
On that open hillside.
Yeah.
Or short ones. Or city blocks, you know, what we go, the distance between 162nd and 163rd, which is 20 mile here.
Okay, well, let's look at this one. So the next 3 slides, I think, are ones that Doug put together. And what Doug did was take information that Councilman French provided about properties, and I provided about properties that the city owns, where we could, with only city approval, perhaps add trees that would be mitigation remote from the border, but would help with our community goals of increasing canopy. So do you want to tell us what you put together?
Yeah, I basically, I looked at satellite photos to see what the things look like. And then I drove around to most of them. And just sat on the ground and looked and said, you know, what's here? You can't always tell from satellite photos.
So the pink,
Pink is Lake Forest property, Lake Forest Park property. Green is somebody else's property. The big green up there is a reservoir. Can't remember what the others are.
what's the small green below to the left, or is that 5 acre wood?
Not sure.
Might be, it's 2 parcels.
It may show up when we get a smaller maps. I mean, marked it. So if we go to the next slide, it's got more detail.
But I thought your reflection on this, as I recall, was that there were a lot of those properties that it would be hard.
Oh, here's this picture. I feel. The little tiny red dot there in the middle where the arrow goes to, it's a little strip, it's bioswale. We can plant 3 or 4, we can't plant trees in bioswale, but we can plant trees along the edge. There's another one block or so away. Kind of similar, but you can see that. One of those is actually a playground. I think that was actually a playground, the lower ones. The one down the lower left hand corner has a water retention pond that's a city facility. But there are spaces on the sides of it where we can plant a few trees. But you know, we're talking about trees in the handfuls. Let's see, go on to the next one. Oh, and I think the one up at the top is kind of inaccessible, basically.
Go back.
Sorry, Larry.
The very top that runs off to the property.
Yeah, and that's already forested. Nice deep forest.
Yeah, that's adjacent to the big cemetery up there. It's in Briar.
But it's you know, I couldn't actually get to that one, but the satellite photo shows it quite clearly as being forested. Cover the next one, Larry. Let's see. One of the more interesting ones is the one that the arrows are on the right. It's an area of city property that John is adjacent to King County property, King County Parks and Green.
So that's like the 5 acre wood is that big green area.
Right.
So that's city now, right? That like Forest Park owns that. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And it's forest.
Yeah.
So there's not really an opportunity there.
Right. I didn't even look at that.
There is, I walk in there every day. There is a section of that though that is semi-open, and what the trees that are there are black locust. might be nice to get them out of there and actually do a little replanting of native conifers.
That one I didn't look at. Here it is. This area up on the right is it's an open grassy area. It looks to me like a lot of kids play there, but you know, they say it's partly the Forest Park, probably the county, but possibly a few trees can be planted there. That also includes one of these stormwater retention ponds that are run by the city or like public utilities. A little tiny one right in the corner there in the third corner. Just a very, very narrow little strip. It's got a swale in the middle of it. You can't even see it. It's been slowing the road. I got that picture of it by holding my camera up like this with it. Taking snapping. Most of the others are pretty well forested areas. And this is the last slide. Go ahead, there we go.
It's South Lake Forest Park.
Sorry, South Lake Forest Park, yeah. They're pretty much all forested. I mean, all the places that are marked as city property are forested. I guess one exception is there is a city maintenance yard here on the one above it. Yeah, and okay, right here. We could plant trees there, and I think that would be the lowest priority because it's fenced off, the public can't enjoy them. But if we simply want someplace to take CO2 out of the air and put it into it, that would work. I mean, there are probably other requirements for that city maintenance yard too. It looks like from the air photos, there could be a dozen trees planted there. But we are talking a dozen, not a very large component, 536 or whatever it is.
Sandy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I think we discussed that one last month. It's very little, if any, public access to it as well.
Not sure public access is necessary. We're looking to increase canopy cover for the city. And areas that are not accessible to the public are still perfectly good for trees.
Yeah, I guess I figured, given a choice between a place where the public can enjoy them, both the shade and the beauty of the trees themselves, a place where they can't, I'd rather put a place where they can. Sure. But yes, it would serve the purpose of just adding air pollution removal, things like that.
There is accessibility at that bottom leg that goes down to Forest Park Drive. Is there? Yeah, right there. The public can access through there, but they're not far. That's curling near my house. It's pretty. It's a wetland back there. Blind Creek flows through there.
And the wetlands tend to be pretty well forested.
Yeah.
That's another one, that triangular one toward the bottom is a wetland area. But that one's already being worked on by sorts of. It's pretty forested, but they've already portraits to it.
And that other pink, the bottom left one is a really steep slope. Yes. And it's how as forested as you would want a steep slope at this point. I thought so, yeah. And I think there's some construction debris and riprap in the ground there.
Yeah. But as I probably said in the previous meeting, I sort of had the vision that there were these vacant lots around the city that cover over blackberries. And there really are. At least they don't live there, they aren't in the city.
So your bottom line here is that we're talking about a few tens of trees in aggregate for properties like this. And while that, that we should be considering that, it's not going to be a huge.
It's probably a place our friends would be happy to work with if you have one landowner, not 247. I think putting some in there is fine. Probably maybe a couple of us should go out with the arborists, look at some of those places again. Help them have them all out there with leisure, fine.
Yeah.
But see how realistically those are for trees.
Yeah.
You want to set aside the idea of 30 or so trees for there. Fine. It's not going to be the big place we put in our extra trees and can't put it. All under age.
Freeport did that project some years ago, was to ask citizens who would like trees planted in the right of ways from their houses. But there were quite a few responses.
Well, that was, I think that was done in just one neighborhood over by Sheridan.
It was focused in that area, that's right. Okay, but it was,
Yeah, 20 or 30 trees, I think was planted. Street trees, small trees.
so I guess another alternative is to ask, give residents the opportunity for their property, and they may not be everybody's interested in that way. But maybe some people who like to have.
So let's go to the next slide, because this is the subject that we have been talking about for over the last few months. About where in the city, if we wanted to open it up to have residents have trees. My thought was that we should focus on areas that can be where there's limited canopy cover to begin with, and where we could start going through maybe neighborhood by neighborhood and canvassing all the residents to ask them if they would be interested in having a tree or trees for their property. So what that we identified 3 different areas. And I'm sorry I didn't put that other slide in there, and I don't have internet connection here. I can't send it to Larry. I have never gotten access to it. I think. But so what this, I went out and drove to every street and cul-de-sac of this a few days ago. And this area is probably the area of Lake Forest Park. You see Ballinger, Lower, and 205th, which is the county line at the north end. And then it's bounded by 30th and 33rd and 35th. It's probably the area in Lake Forest Park that has the lowest canopy cover for any contiguous area. There's a small area down near the cemetery, right down the south end, that also has limited canopy cover. And there was another area that we identified as sort of in the northeast corner of the city that also had fairly low canopy cover. In most cases, they're relatively small lots with probably some lower house value areas, I'd say. I certainly noticed in driving through this neighborhood just within the last couple of days that there were a lot of lawns, many of them going ground already, and it's the first week of June. It's the sort of areas where I think we could, with an educational effort, encourage people to want to have more trees. I think the absence of trees in neighborhoods is due to a couple different things. One is some people just don't want trees, and another is that some people feel that they have a limited budget, and buying, a tree to plant in their garden is not something that rises to the surface.
What a vegetable garden, not a shade.
Well, that's another thing, sure. But, trees offer the advantage of cooling
I know.
ground. There's a lot of advantages to trees. Yeah, well, I'm sure that that's the case in some of them, but a lot of these are neighborhood or lots, people's yards that probably, even if 1 in 10 of those properties wanted a tree, that would be, 100 trees or something, maybe not 100, but 40 or 50 trees.
These trees come with several years of maintenance. These by Red Bank and is responsible.
Yeah, but they would be responsible for it, although I don't know how that would work on private property.
Yeah, good question.
I think what we had in mind was that we would provide the property owner with a tree, and if we could do it, assistance in planting it, and with information about how to properly maintain a tree, and basically be up to them.
Answer to Hannah's question. Sounds like they're really quite a bit of stuff.
Yeah.
The last question or so, I don't know, like there was.
Then also, what might be helpful, once we're done with this PowerPoint, would it be helpful for me to share the revised draft of the tree ordinance that will be taken up tomorrow? I kind of walk through that in the show of what the current plan is here for that.
Yeah. So what Doug was saying, in response to a question about who will care for these trees long term. It says some transit will be responsible for the health and well-being of newly planted trees like Rose Park. Maintenance costs vary by city tree, blah, blah, blah. We're not aware of any studies that show an impact analysis. That was another part of that question, but I think, my guess is that they're talking about things that are planted in the corridor right away, not in the neighborhood. In a tree.
That makes good sense. That's not why I read that. It makes sense. It's and it's translation of what they sold first.
And also, I think that that's where, if we had a chance to speak with them, face to face, we could explain what our interests are. They may have only been thinking about order. So,
I know it is worth pointing out that these are smaller lots, probably more of those lots are occupied by house. That's part of the reason they don't have trees is because the yard is full of house. Nevertheless, you know, put trees where there aren't trees, to me, a very high priority and a good way of using trees in the.
so this was the other figure that I think that I showed last time. This was the background map for this is the tree canopy cover. With the darker the orange, the more dense the canopy. And we identified these three areas as having neighborhoods with the lowest tree canopy cover.
Is that one different than what you did?
This is basically, in blue is the one that I've outlined in red. I went and sort of ground truth that to try to figure out the area that was most important, and that's the most, I think, critical. That's why there's some difference between these two.
Well, a question for me would be whether you want to try to spread it out across the city with emphasis on this area, or which I think would be the way to go, especially interested in this particular area, perhaps, rather than start of a campaign to see what people would like trees to limit it to that area.
That's right, I understand what you said.
Well, I'm saying if we were to put information out to the public, saying we're interested in property owners who would like trees planted. You start at the point of saying like between 35th and to 195th, will you try to describe that zone? Or would you exclusively?
Or we may get open up
Anybody
everybody.
in the city, and say cities especially interested.
We had talked about this before. We started talking about this before the sound transit thing even was on our radar screen as a means of how can we make use of what resources we have for the tree board for tree planting. And at that point, we were thinking for a long-term plan would be to identify a series of neighborhoods and sort of walk through them once every couple of years, have a campaign to encourage property owners in this neighborhood, you know, and in this neighborhood and so on to have the trees that the city can provide.
Because the feeling might be that the demand might be good, great.
Yes, if we just put it out broadly. Also, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if we just put it out broadly that people who are property owners in regions that already have dense canopy might say, oh yeah, I'm talking over the trees, I really like trees.
Like you're back there.
Yeah, right. And that's not really, I think, our goal here is to increase canopy cover throughout the city.
But actually, I like what Mark's saying, because I think what we could say is priority would be given to areas which have lower, areas of the city that have lower, so let everybody go, you know, if we get 100, if we get 80 applications for 100 trees, we give them the 80 applicants, we get 150 applications.
We have
Pick the 100 that look, yeah, I think we can identify here, and that gives us, you know, first of all, simple as the whole city, you don't identify the addresses. Well, identify
And another way to look at priority too would be in terms of the canopy coverage goals or lot size.
Right.
So priority could be given to those properties that are currently below the target, you know, canopy coverage.
Or in neighborhoods where the average canopy coverage is. Well, I mean, I mean, that's
don't make it too complex.
Yeah.
So regardless of where the city, someone might come up, say that it had meet that requirement, it would be to the benefit of the city.
You know, we have a really good program, it's easy enough to do. We have a map, I can bring up a map that shows you the coverage for every lot.
The reason I had a dash line across the middle of that at 195th was just that if we do it small neighborhood by small neighborhood, then this could be split into a couple of different.
No, I think that's not bad to have target neighborhoods. It just gets a little harder to, I think, communicate that with the public perhaps. Or that.
Yeah,
Notify
people who aren't in the neighborhood might feel that they're
Being,
not getting the fair share or fair shake of something. I see.
being called out as a tree board neighborhood or something.
Well, that's, I think your idea about having citywide, but then priority for properties that are under the canopy. We have that information for all properties.
I doubt that we do, sitting in a table anywhere, but when you go to get a tree permit. Yeah, we do, we have a map.
Yeah.
When I last did it, they pencil out your area review. Coverage is, and you say, oh, what if that's 47%?
There's a spreadsheet that has it for every property in the city.
Well, has the targets, but the actual coverage.
Yeah, coverage. I don't know if I'm not sure how you would match that with the target.
Yeah.
But there's a spreadsheet that has it lot by lot. Now it's old. It's 6 or 8 years old, but nevertheless, it's both in map form and in table form.
Well, then that would be very useful. Yeah.
Of course, what you won't see is somebody who's had to cut a tree down and has lost a lot of canopy. Doesn't currently have a canopy limitation. And I guess the other thing here, we would put time limit on, see, get your application in by such and such a date. At that point, we can see how many applicants we've got and whether we even use a priority system.
There are more slides.
No, that's the last slide.
Okay, so if you'd like, what I could do, if we stop sharing, I could queue up the draft of the ordinance. Because some of what you're talking about in terms of how should we prioritize, there's a couple of different options within the ordinance. So
Can I make one other comment before you jump into that, Larry? I'm just thinking, is another, maybe the lowest priority that we could ask to be other ways that sound transit could improve our forests, besides replanting. Are there places where there are invasive trees that would be good to have removed, or where there's carpets of ivy in forested areas that can be infestations of ivy that could be cleared? I wonder if there's a lowest category, which is you can't help replace trees. How can you improve our forest?
The in lieu payments we use that way.
In lieu payments could be, yeah, that's, you take the money and hire. You regular, ivy regulars, you translate that money into ivy somehow.
But we would all prefer to see it used to replace trees.
Sure.
Trees, yeah. But
Yeah.
if they may get lieu payments, that we have a lot of flexibility.
But
Yes.
removal of invasive trees and one-to-one replacement with native trees or something might be. There you go. Rid of those huge infestations of orange cherry hedges that people have along their property. The fourth year, I walked 140 the Ballinger to get to my bus stop. There's a stretch along Ballinger here, the stretch of 140 where somebody's hedge has left about 12 inches of sidewalk available. Right, and the whole rest of it is overgrown. Their hedge.
Off of 180.
No, it's not Ballinger.
Okay. I don't know.
Oh,
Like based like that.
Yeah, there are lots of those places, that's the thing. World Series is my personal.
Well, I don't know, that may be getting too far off, but maybe another thought to think of.
Well, the ordinance we used as the draft had sort of last chance option for in lieu payments. Leave it in there.
Yeah, presumably those are funds that are to be used for forest improvement. And primarily, probably think of planning, but.
Is that too tiny?
Yes.
Just have a person question.
Sure.
So coming in late to this conversation, thank you for letting us speak here today. How did this start? Did the tree board sort of embrace this plan for Sound Transit? Was there ever any concern? And what's the feeling about the removal of the current trees?
Process was pretty far underway. That is the planning for the quarter. Before we were ever apprised of it or given it. Stand expectation to be part of the solution. So we've been sort of tree board's interest over the last couple of years has largely been devoted to them trying to do some education things. Think about it. I agree with the project. But we haven't had done much tree planting activities the last few years. And that's something we've been thinking about wanting to do. And now this need from the Sound Transit project and our interest in tree planting are the second.
Answer part of your question. I think, we had already said it. I think our feeling, quite sure our feeling is that the highest priority of all is to not take trees out, minimize the number of trees you can take it out. And I think Sound Transit has agreed to do that. So I think some transit says they will do that.
As of right, I don't know the exact details, but I think in the latest plan, they were as high as 500, now they're down to kind of below to mid-300s. So that they are revising their plans as they go to try to be less disruptive.
Has anybody seen a list of those 300 trees? Does that mean with the description, type and size?
I drive along 522 and look, trying to imagine what's coming out. There's a lot of trees in there that are.
There's a lot of smaller trees, aren't there?
Trees
That are less than 6 inches.
Yeah, a lot of things are not.
I wonder if
necessarily
they're
desirable.
There is an inventory. I don't think it's to the level of species, but in terms of like what's the total number of trees in, let's say, the 153rd to 165th section.
Right.
And then the total number, how many of those are landmark trees versus how many of those are, between, let's say, 6 and 24 inches. So there is that sort of inventory.
You think the inventory does not include less than 6 inches?
Oh, it does. It includes, like, it kind of breaks it down to, what's the other one that's not landmark? Significant. So like how many landmark trees, how many significant trees, how many non-significant trees. So that's, and then how many trees don't need to be removed.
I'd like to see that, maybe I'll follow up.
Yeah, and I think either planning director Steve Bennett or public works director Jeff Perigo, I think one of them has that. But yeah, I could pass that be sent to the tree board.
I don't think any of our regulations deal with trees less than 6 inches.
No, they don't.
So, if they did that, if they told us about that, it's nice, but I don't. At this point, our regulations don't say anything about replacing.
But I don't know
trees
if
that small.
that, Larry said it's the 300s of trees. I don't know if that includes trees. That means,
I believe it's
say something, 6 inches.
that's the
over.
entire count, every tree.
So that includes some 3 or 4 inch diameter trees.
The significant, I think significant is the lowest size category.
Yeah.
And we really got to be
Well, so the question, the question is, those trees that are smaller than 6 inches may not be required to be replaced. But I guess you could look at that as an overall picture of the forest. These are trees that are going to be coming someday.
Right. But it's
Was that the question you were asking? or-
Yeah, I'm just, we were at the city council meeting and they were talking about the wall and, you know, could they put like vines? Would it, you know, the problem there is deciduous, so you know, you put some kind of covering or a spread plant, and that's tricky. And then I started thinking, is there even like an environmental solution where your wall is made out of something other than concrete? Because I assume the primary purpose there is retention, right? There's a lot of conversation, Larry can talk about this, reflective noise to the east side of the street. The bigger concern that one council member had than the noise behind the wall. So it's the aesthetics of the wall. Can they green it at all? That seemed challenging. And then the reflective noise was the other big question. Then I just thought, is there some type of, you know, the concrete bothers people, it's the sound, the visual effect, assuming it's there to retain, you know, the wall.
To
it's
keep
there
the
to
land
retain-
sliding down.
Yeah, 95,000 acres, 95,000 tons of soil removal is never accurate. That's a big dust issue. So I just, the whole thing, right, is interconnected. How does this all work? Dirt, plants, trees, and wall.
You're driving down 522. There is walking, I look to the sides and see what the walls, there's just already a lot of walls there. Many of them are really quite nice. On the other hand, you go through Kenmore, and there are these 12-foot concrete slabs.
Other
In this
between,
area, there's a lot of trees, a lot of walls that are textured, they're stone, or something else that they don't. Aren't bad looking at all, I don't think.
out between Kenmore and Bothell, there's that one big retaining wall that they have textured to make it look like a natural rock. Cliff. I think that it's not bad, but then further out here where 522 and 405 come together, there are some retaining walls that have ivy or maybe Virginia creeper or something kind of on it. And I think that's what the city has in mind, right, is trying to find something that would be a green living cover that should go up along the wall.
I don't think there's a clear plan that Larry.
So what the retaining wall ordinance would say is that the wall itself can't be just plain concrete. It either needs to have some sort of artistic designs kind of etched into it, or a natural looking rock face sort of look. And then on top of that, there needs to be some sort of foliage. So like the ivy, Boston ivy would be a candidate. So there would need to be both artistic designs and ivy, depending on where it is, would there be irrigation required? But at the very least, there would be the requirement for artistic design plus ivy.
You think the tree board could have a say in that? I think they're probably the most. It's not like there's a lot of expertise, I don't think, around this right now. Or requests for expertise.
Yeah.
Of course, our expertise on ID mostly goes on get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's, we would not be able to sign it.
You know, it's lost, but the only IDs we've ever discussed is we just ID, how to get rid of it.
Right.
And what to do with that actually pull.
I think that was the challenge of the conversation, was what can you put there?
Frankly, I'm not sure that the tree board has expertise that would go beyond what the city arborist and the some transit people would have in that regard. So our interest is more in forest health and canopy cover of the city. And to the extent that this is going to impact that, we want to be able to help develop plans to mitigate that impact.
Is that bigger? Do you want me to make it?
One more outside there.
It's still too small for my eyes.
Okay.
Right. Not bad.
So you want me to just kind of walk through this? Sure. Let's try to hit some of the priority areas where the council would like feedback. So the introduction, definition.
By the way, the definition of quarter is going to be in there though.
Yeah, so they're looking for things that are highlighted. So all of this is unchanged. So things like minor changes into the
Our definition of corridor there, that,
Yeah,
definitions, oh, we're still at the definition.
it's under R, right? So here, just kind of defining what on-site planting is. More detailed. So here, this is what you're asking. So right-of-way corridor. So this is where it's defined currently as 1,000 feet in either direction And if 1,000 feet east gets you into Lake Washington, then it's added to the west side. So it might be like 600 feet east and 1,400 feet west. So it's a 2,000 foot width. And I think the feedback, informal feedback was that you'd like to see that dropped to maybe 500 feet on each side rather than 1,000 on each side.
Or was there some insight? Some, why 1,000? 1,000 is what, about a mile is 5,200.
It's about 4 blocks. I think the feedback, I think the idea was to try to make, if the top priority is in corridor, then making the corridor larger makes it easier to kind of hit your top priority.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's a topic for you to discuss is, should that be a top priority, or is it okay to shrink the corridor, but with the consequence that more trees would need to be planted outside? And so what would the second tier priority be? So is that something, do you want to maybe take an official vote on, if you'd like to recommend dropping it, or are you happy to sort of inform feedback? How formal we should be, I mean, it's a government advisory board, so probably should ask for a vote. I mean,
I figured we had a strong consensus amongst us that we,
yeah.
Yeah, and I think taking a vote would be fine. How, what the actual width that we would want, I don't know how you would come up with that. I think maybe that we could vote as a sense of the board that 1,000 feet is too wide.
Okay, and then I will then kind of transmit that when the council is discussing. I'll say, the general consensus of the board, of the tree board, was that. So is that, Sandy, also, I mean, I just want to get, like, is that kind of the sense of the tree board that 1,000 is too wide?
yeah,
Okay, so I will be sure to transmit that.
it does raise a question, within, say, within 1,000 or even within 500 feet. What mechanism would sound transit use to find planting locations?
Right, I think that might be coming up. So
Kind of agree with that.
more definitions, just kind of clarifying different types of tree permits, saying that the arborist needs to review. Kind of defining what, so the right-of-way tree permit, this would be like a one-off. Let's say someone's looking to maybe expand their driveway or repave their driveway. And in doing that, they need to take out a tree that's on the curb. So if you're just looking to take out a small number of trees to individual homeowner, that would be the right-of-way tree permit. The right-of-way corridor permit, that would be sort of what the Sound Transit project, or next year when the city's putting the roundabout on 104 and 40th, that's where you're taking down a substantial number of trees. So just to kind of clarifying that there's like a low-level permit and a high-level permit. Riley, does that sound accurate?
That sounds accurate. I know no better, but that sounds accurate.
The low-level permit would be, for example, the incident we had that came to our attention this last year, where somebody on Horizon here took out 2 mature trees that were right on the street right away. And it was found that there was no requirement to be replaced because they was in the right away and not on their property.
City right away turns out to be the Wild West with tree planting. There's no laws. So this is mostly just catching up.
And
But,
then,
but the simple right of way is just like one household, one property.
yes,
2 or more becomes corridor,
Oh, that's good.
right? I mean, I think that's in there somewhere.
I think so. That the idea is that if you're just one homeowner, you shouldn't have to go through this much more burdensome process.
Right.
Whereas if you were a major agency or the city itself, then there should be a more robust process. So trying to lower the barrier for someone who's just trying to fix up their driveway.
Yeah.
So here, sort of explaining what needs to go into the application, so that, so what would the applicant provide, a site plan, a list of all the trees, explaining why this is the least invasive approach. Then why do you need to take out this number? Why couldn't you got it done with a smaller number? A lot of this is, if I'm going fast through, it's because it's kind of written by the administration, staff, and the legal team. It's less of a policy decision.
So the corridor right of way, that would mostly be a municipal or case of Sound Transit, super municipal entity that would be responsible.
Generally, yes. Which is part of the reason why this hasn't come up before. Because there's haven't been a lot of these sort of, I guess the Burke Gilman might have been the most recent one. Where, and that would have been King County, so again, a government type agency.
If somebody, say a developer has a large lot or something, if they want to develop into multiple units, would that fall under a quarter versus one of the small?
I am not sure. But actually, this is one of the important parts here. So the canopy replacement plan. So one option is a 4-tiered system. So tier 1, highest priority in the corridor. Tier 2,
Are we gonna go back to the mini corridor things or the mini right of way things?
I think it might be more useful for us to focus on the big corridor, since that's where that's the projects where a potentially large number of trees.
I just had a couple of objections to the single tree right of way issues. First of all, I thought that probably that if we're going to be in the city right away, the city arborist ought to at least check off, yes, it's an acceptable species plant there for the replacement one. And Steve was here last month. I objected to say you have to have it surveyed because like where I live, there are three trees between my sidewalk, it's not my sidewalk, the city sidewalk, and the road. So they're very clearly in the right of way. They don't have to pay a surveyor several $100 to know it's in the right of way.
The response from staff was that, well, in some cases, that might be very clear cut. In other cases, it starts taking kind of borderline where the tree is sort of like the roots might be going, and where exactly is the tree? And so for sort of, and I think there's, and Riley can chime in, that staff might be able to sort of, say, okay, this meets our standards, but it's partly to ensure that we're not caught in something where someone says, oh yeah, it's definitely in the right of way, and then it turns out to technically be on their neighbor's property.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the reason for the surveys, just to make sure that i's are dotted, t's are crossed.
Yeah, if it was obvious.
But it doesn't say a survey unless it's obvious. It just says a survey is required. And that's what I don't like. Yeah, there's surveys cost money. I don't know what they cost, but well, I guess sometimes don't do it.
But it seems that that certain scenario would be a staff interpretation regardless. I mean, that would be a discussion between Steve and the attorney.
But I thought the way it was written, there was no flexibility in asking survey. Instead of if you say a survey is required, then a survey is required.
Well, there's an so either a site plan including surveyed locations or authorization from all owners. So I think that might be kind of what you're getting at, where if you and your neighbor and the city can all be satisfied that, yeah, it's obvious, then you don't have to have a formal survey. So I think, yeah, the second clause kind of addresses that concern. So on priority.
Hey, real quick on that one. I kind of feel like it's not reading as I would read it. My understanding is that a site plan would be expected. And so the sentence should read, a site plan including either the survey or authorization from all owners. Because it feels like it reads right now that it's, you either have a site plan or authorization from all the owners, and that's not what I heard.
So I can, so what I'm planning to do is I'll kind of, after the meeting, I'll sort of summarize the tree board's feedback, and then I'll pass that along to planning director Bennett to say, yeah, these are some areas that I'll bring up to the council. So make him aware, so that way he can address that to sort of ensure that what we think this clause means is what it actually means. So I'll pass that along. But yeah, thanks. Can I move on to the priority? So tier 1. So in this option, tier 1 is in the corridor itself. And there's some instructions that the applicant needs to get permission from homeowners Or if we're delegating that to key conservation district, that key conservation district would be reaching out to homeowners or some sort of, just sort of a blanket, hey, who's interested? So that would be the top priority. And then the second priority would be offsite areas that are identified. This would be sort of a map that says, okay, this neighborhood is an offsite priority zone. And then the third priority would be free for all everywhere else in the city. And in the unlikely event that that doesn't get you to the full replacement, then option or tier 4 would be a fee in lieu of. That's where Sound Transit can't find homes for all the trees they need to plant, so they'll pay the city to take care of that eventually.
So that's pretty similar to what we were talking about, having priorities for this planning.
I think Mark's suggestion is sort of a free for all of the city with priorities for certain areas. First, be well covered by B and C there.
Yeah, well, if we explain to let's see, it refers to a right-of-way corridor offsite replacement areas. Is that something yet to be developed?
You mean this language right here?
Yeah, those
Yeah.
identified as such a-
Essentially, yeah, that is what we would be asking the tree board and staff to work on. Because right now we sort of have proof of concept of the maps we talked about earlier tonight. Could we then have, if this, an actual city council approved, this neighborhood is an officially designated tree priority zone or offsite replanting area, or what we're gonna call it. So just officially codifying that for any, because this is not just for Sound Transit, this is for any corridor plan that's taking down a lot of trees. So Sound Transit, the roundabout, other future projects. So this neighborhood would, until we modify it, would be a priority zone for any time there's a corridor project.
So that this mitigation has to be part of the plan for any such corridor project.
Right. Important to keep in mind that while the Sound Transit project is the catalyst for us working on this, this ordinance is not a Sound Transit ordinance. This is a fully general, anytime in the future there's a situation like this, this is how the city will handle it. So it's important for this to be a robust process. So that's the first approach. The second approach kind of consolidates and says top priority is in the corridor. And then the second priority is offsite in preferred zones, and that's the end of it. So there's no in lieu of fee for this approach, neither is there a general free flow. So I'd be curious, I guess if one option is 4 tiers, and then a second option is 2 tiers, and then a third option would be kind of do a free for all, but the city would prioritize applications that are in a priority area. Is that different than this 4-tier approach? I'm sure this is how it's implemented. But happy for you to kind of have discussion and what's the general consensus of the group? How do you want to prioritize replanting?
The only difference is that how you would go about establishing what would be the priorities for the offsite neighborhood plannings. Whether it would just be something open to anybody, or whether it would be a priority based on neighborhoods defined in some way, or a priority based on can it be covered for individual lots of homeowners who might want a tree. Maybe where.
Yeah, so that option of looking across the city where there are lots that are below targets that we talked about. It seems to get lost in that second statement.
That would to identify individual lot by lot individually, unless that has been compiled at some point. Has been percent cover by lot, rather than just done on a lot by lot basis when there's a permit required.
Don't seem to think
There is such a thing, yeah. When a permit is required, the city arborist goes into the lot and draws circles around trees, more accurate, almost sort of canopy thing. But it's certainly more up to date. But there is, in the last canopy thing, there is a spreadsheet that says, lot so and so has so much square feet of canopy area. Now, what it does with that spreadsheet doesn't say is, but I think, but you would have to do some working with, it's to say, what's the target area for that lot?
I think it's lots of lot size.
I think lots, yeah, target coverage is based on lot size, so you have, that's not big, you talk about, you still only talk about a couple hundred trees. So you're
But I
talking about
think
somebody going, saying,
If we made that a priority, if we made an open offer of trees to the city, but had those lots that were under canopy target cover as the priority, that would mean somebody would have to go through and identify those.
Yeah.
Or at least identify if somebody puts in a request for a tree. Or they're-
oh, yeah, you do by request on that lot. If somebody wants a tree and say, yeah, he's priority or he's not. No, that you can do. A citywide basis, you just say, ask for a tree,
So if I may, it kind of sounds like as a policy matter, two directions we could go. One direction would be to look at it at a neighborhood level. This neighborhood has a general lack of trees. This neighborhood is a priority neighborhood. Second approach would be at a more lot level. This particular lot is tree deficient, no matter what neighborhood it's in. Therefore, this lot is a priority lot. So what I would ask the tree board, do you like sort of a neighborhood level approach or a parcel level approach?
I think the neighborhood approach is better because then it tells you know all the trees.
I like the neighborhood approach because once you identify a neighborhood, you could reach out with education, with solicitation for people, homeowners to take a tree, rather than just putting out an announcement, waiting for homeowners to respond.
Well, and keep in mind, it's gonna do this canvassing of that section of the city. Find out that information.
Well, if you had a neighborhood, presumably somewhere there is a ownership role where you can send, get the names and addresses of all those
Association,
rental lots, I guess.
there are 30-some night outs held every August. There are some organizations like that within a designated geography. Still, somebody's got to do that work. Figure that out. There is something very appealing about focusing on a neighborhood. Significant section of the city where you make a difference in the canopy. Presumably the same rule would apply there that you find big lots. Target. But the question would be, I guess, maybe that's the way you try to get, 5 or 6 responses, you want to cast a larger net.
and I think for the sake of South Transit and something else, I'm still in favor of doing a citywide offer and prioritizing, the ones that are in the neighborhoods and saying the offer, priority will be given. Priority will be given to neighborhoods that have fewer trees. And then you get all your applications to the deadline of April 31st. Oh, April 31st, when you've got all the applications and you go through the applications and say, where are they?
Sometimes I'm not sure where we are in the South Transit process, so I don't know what the timing would be in that kind of survey. But I can see it being an easier thing to do.
It's easier to hear the whole city and then get all the applications and watch it back.
So you might have a backlog at some point of 160 properties that were interested in taking advantage of that offer. So that's what the regulation referred to.
But you could say in the mailing house, there's only 250 trees, so priority will be given to.
Well, that's true. There is.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Seattle did, they had, certain number of trees. As you
Sure.
sure,
Like Seattle, whatever the fund.
yeah. So make it very clear that you don't necessarily get a tree just if you ask.
So,
Right.
and my understanding that kind of the sense of the board is you like that sort of cast a citywide net and then kind of say, well, okay, we have this many applicants, let's say which applicants are in group 1 and which applicants are in group 2, and then everybody else has trees permits. So basically survey the entire city and then kind of go through this permits. That rather than saying we are going to do outreach in the corridor. And when that outreach is completed, then we will start outreach in the target neighborhoods. And then when that is done, only then will we actually start reaching out to the city overall.
I think the corridor has to be the priority,
Yeah.
both for the stop transit and any future. So maybe there should be a priority for that.
Like, so kind of section 1 would be by itself, and then kind of sections 2 and 3 would be, everybody is welcome to apply. Preferences given if you're in group 2 as opposed to group 3. Yeah. And one more follow-up on the map you saw earlier, there were all those big parcels for city owned. Currently, that's in group 3 because unless that happens to be in one of these priority neighborhoods, it would just be in a catch-all. Does the tree board like that, or would the tree board like there to be sort of like a 5th priority, like maybe in between 2 and 3 for city-owned parcels?
City-owned parcels are places where we should be looking to plant trees regardless of circumstances, but this is, we're talking now about a specific mitigation effort for corridor rights of way. Those are two different things.
So it sounds like there's a general consensus that you like this sort of 4-tier approach of corridor, priority neighborhoods, other places, and then catch all, at that point, just pay some money. As like a last resort option.
But in terms of implementing, we probably combine 2 and 3.
Yes, okay. So I will be sure to relay that to the council. Not sure how much is left on the ordinance. I think it's, there's another part. Where is it? So this is basically saying what the public comment and notice periods are. So for major tree permits, you have there's like a 2-week window where you have to post a sign before you can cut anything. And this, I believe, is essentially saying that that's what the corridor would be as well. That Sound Transit couldn't just, like on Wednesday, the permit's approved, on Thursday, there's chainsaws. So there would still be that process where there would be public notice. Everybody who is within some number of feet, I think it's 300 feet of the corridor, would be mailed a notice saying, here's the plan. There would be a window for people to potentially appeal that. It would be the same, it would be the major tree permit process that we currently have. Do we feel, the council felt it was very important for there to be, for both the retaining walls and the trees, that there be this sort of public notice period? Is that thoughts from the tree board on that? I know this is quite small text.
Well, I think it's definitely, there definitely should be a public notice period.
Public notice of both,
And it's not clear that it makes much.
yeah, I'm not clear what it
It's
is. Public
mostly-
notice by now.
Notice that in 2 weeks chainsaws will start.
Well, for any tree permit, the notice would be, hey, I am going to be cutting down 6 trees in my backyard.
Right.
And post a sign up. That's essentially what, in this case, if it was for the Sound Transit project, Sound Transit would have to publicly notice that we are going to be removing 331 trees along this corridor. And then mail that notice to everybody within 300 feet of off the way. So essentially, it's saying that, because if you were to look at the code, this is basically the major tree permit.
Your major tree permits require mailing of the announcement to neighbors?
No.
Yeah,
They just are posting on the property. Right?
When they go, there's most don't, but if they go, there's a certain threshold, but most of their bigger projects.
I think it mimics the major development.
yes, and so this,
Don't.
this section here basically says sending out mail to everybody who owns property within 300 feet. And it's get the project sites effectively the entirety of Bothell Way from Seattle to Kenmore. So is it the feeling that that's a good, that we want there to be that sort of robust public notice, public comment
I
period?
guess for moving a little bureaucracy the size of Sound Transit, 2 weeks is nothing. I mean, Sound Transit is currently sticking decisions they made 3 years ago and saying, well, that's what the voters voted on, so that's the way it's going to be. And I don't really see a 2-week notice from any advantage whatsoever. It doesn't hurt anything.
I don't think the notice period is is useful for homeowners to protest or to try to change things. Is mostly a notice that this is about to happen. Be aware.
And again, keep in mind, again, this is not a sound transit ordinance, so this is the, essentially for any future public city-owned road corridor, this is the plan. So anytime, if it's Ballinger, if it's Perkins Way, anytime this is happening for a corridor, there would be this level of notice.
I think more than 2 weeks is necessary. Further should be tied to that.
I don't understand what you're saying, Doug.
Well, I don't. The projects, the planning timeframe for any kind of corridor project, roundabout or anything else. You know, it's a multi-year project kind of thing, and saying, oh, well, 2 weeks before we actually start cutting trees, we're gonna put a notice on. That's way too late in the multi-year planning process to notify people.
Yeah, but it is the notification that that work is gonna be commenced in 2 weeks. The private planning process has gone on for, a year and a half, 2 years, so there's been a lot of public involvement in that process, or at least the last 6 months, a year.
The notification on tree removal permits for neighborhood private properties and so on. Part of the reason for notification is so that neighbors can object. And there have been a couple of cases that in recent years.
Yeah.
In this case, not really for people to object because the planning is well beyond that stage.
That's the point of the corridor. Yeah, yeah.
It's mostly just that
Yeah, are
the
there,
work is about to commence.
so like, I'm trying to recall at what point in the nature development project, public, hearing examiner, ruling comes into play. Appeals. It'd be within that, it would be.
People want to go through the appeal process.
Within a 2 week, could an appeal be made that would result in a hearing exam?
I'm not sure exactly how that works. I would only be mostly flexible.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen often. I'll say that.
Right. Well, I don't know, you guys objecting to the 2 week?
Oh, I just don't see it accomplishing anything. I mean, it's all got and done by that.
Yeah, I think 2 weeks.
All it needs is get your earplugs for your game once it takes one.
Yeah, I think it's just the difference in whether the announcement is to give neighbors an opportunity to object or protest or file a appeal versus giving them warnings like that.
Here's a clarification question. This 2 weeks, is this triggered by when the applicant files their corridor permit, which is kind of at the beginning of the process? Or when they actually say, we want to cut down, we're going to be cutting down these trees next month.
So, again, I can't speak to this, it's like brand new and mostly Canada does this, but I can say with the terms that we have currently, posting those applications after the application is complete. So say if they submit for a permit and they don't have all the materials, we wait for a full complete submittal, then we can start the notice process. But the notice process also would include staff labor, like forming the mailings and doing the labels, all that sort of ministerial things. So that can take maybe up to 15 days max to do other things. So, but it would all be concurrent, like posted to the newspaper, mailed out, and posted on the site, like all on the same day. And then that day, it would be a 2 week.
So I think this might address your concerns because this is then toward the beginning of the process. This is
That
the applicant
would
saying,
be the notice of application when they apply. Now, there's a notice of decision as to whether or not it's approved or not approved. It doesn't seem like that's brought up. That usually occurs at the end.
I thought that was triggered in 2 week period. That's fine. That was the approval of the permit.
No, that's just a notice that it has been applied.
so within 14 days of issue of a complete application being received.
Yes.
So that's the beginning of the process,
Yeah.
which,
Okay.
so, and then, it's a huge project. It might be months and months before there's actual construction in any particular location.
So what was it, 14 days? I've already got 14 days plus
Yeah, there's a public comment period that, so this, it is early in the process. Someone objects saying, well, why are you going to be removing so many trees around 165th Street? That would be the window for people, for the public to comment.
And then the comments would be considered in tandem with laws being written.
That's
So-
very short then.
So then, well, I mean, most projects are not as big as this 522. So then the city staff would make a decision. And then I believe would trigger another 2-week process where people could potentially appeal it to the hearing examiner. Is that correct?
Yeah, that sounds accurate.
Yeah, all of this with the caveat that I'm not in the planning department, but that's my understanding of the gist of the process.
For what it's worth, Steve and Hannah have been doing most of planning these regulations, but I kind of am able to get some. That sounds like.
I don't wonder what the hearing examiner, geez, like, or sound transit was involved. There've been a couple of really great outcomes from hearing examiners' decisions on development. But if it's a project being run by, this major agency that has the ability to override local regulations, we don't have. But anyway, to your point, I don't see a problem with that. It's really hard not to think of this all in terms of Sound Trade Center, also because it's a peculiar area that Sound Trade started, and we had a pandemic for 2 years, and nobody sort of locally did anything, while Sound Trade was just going out with their planning. So time for a lot of the activity Core is doing so forth. The ideal time for that would have been for a year or so after we started the planning, but we were all wrapped up in our little loose end.
Shall I add any other comments or should I continue on?
Just one other one. You mentioned that this is not a sound transit ordinance. It's an ordinance not forward for any development. If that's the case, then we should.
So I think that the sense I'm getting is that definitely include a comment period. Questions about is 14 days the right length for a large project, but there should be a comment period.
Should be a comment period. 14 days seems like a short.
For what it's worth, they're almost always 14 days. Some SEPA notices have been posted for 2020 in the past, but like for conditional use permit notice application, that sort of thing. They should.
I don't think that matters that much.
Yeah.
Then kind of getting into, let's see, so what are the actual criteria? I get this. So for right-of-way permits, when, basically saying for the planning department staff, what do they need to consider when they're making their decision? So what do they need to consider for the right-of-way permit? That's sort of like one house. And then what do they need to consider for the corridor permit? And also getting that there needs to be a maintenance plan. So for trees that are not being removed, but could potentially be damaged by the construction, that the applicant would be responsible for kind of monitoring and make sure that those trees are not dying.
Well, that's at risk, that 5 is at risk trees, right?
Yes,
So those are trees that are not being.
Yeah.
But have a possibility to be damaged.
right. If the construction might damage their roots, even though the tree itself is not being removed. So this is sort of echoing what's already in the major tree permit that we visit the city's code. And saying that, so the permits are good for 6 months unless they're sort of, this has the potential to be a very long-term project. So making sure that it doesn't go on forever, just try to keep track of that. Getting into maintenance. So, so for tree, actually, I guess it's basically the end of the ordinance.
Was it, is that part of the?
That was, the city council had that. I asked that to be included, just so that we can sort of see, and actually, we do have this to like parcel level of parcels in red have low canopy. So you can kind of see from the neighborhood, which neighborhoods are tree for, and then which specific parcels. So yeah, that data does exist.
that pretty much mirrors what we.
It was, close, yeah. Well, that's my shout.
I did want to make one little point. So I know that the consensus was to shrink, so the heavy dash is 1,000, this is 500.
Right.
So that's, yeah, that kind of tells you what the corridor would look like. Between 500 and 1,000 is still a relatively tree poor area. But I think so that would be an argument.
But it's tree poor because people don't want trees.
Yeah,
in that neighborhood.
So is it still the consensus of the board to shrink it from 1,000 to 500?
Did you say what that distance was, Larry, that?
So this
color
dash,
area?
this dash line is, so these dash lines are 500. These are 1,000.
Oh, yeah.
Can you blow that up, though, Larry? Is that possible?
I don't know.
Maybe
It
start
would
shaping
make
it
more
like-
sense.
Well, it certainly
See
would
that-
encompass that neighborhood that is tree poor.
Yeah, but it's not, the neighborhood's a state where it's going to stay tree.
Yeah, you're right.
Because people don't want to put the trees there in there. It's not, that's not a neighborhood that's tree poor because of lack of opportunity.
Well,
It's a lot of property.
that's a good assumption, but, it's a.
Yeah, I live in that neighborhood. I'll tell you that. We don't put trees in front of our houses, certainly. If we're nice, we don't put trees in the back of our
That's
houses.
for education.
Also,
You cannot educate me to see through a tree when I'm trying to look at Lake Washington.
I had an argument.
so thoughts, are we still, is the tree board still kind of leaning towards 500 as the preferred width?
Well, 500 would avoid that having much of the corridor extended to Lake Washington. Which doesn't make sense. And
It's actually. I'm saying they did.
well, just that the notion that when you get to Lake Washington, if the corridor impinges on Lake Washington, it shifts it all up away from the lake. Then the parts of that, from the town center all the way up to
Yeah.
Bogwood Park, I mean, most of the corridor will be
Yeah.
off the lake, and it will be 800 feet away from the road.
Yeah, around 165th, 500 is Lake Washington, so it would be 500 feet east, 1,500 feet west.
Yeah. But well, really, if you think of 1,000, the lots that are towards the edge of that 1,000 are going to be towards the top of the hill, which may be more open to having trees than those that are, where the trees would be blocking views, would be in the 500 range. Seems to be more likely lower down.
But they would be also, if you use your idea of is the tree close to its required canopy, or encouraged canopy, they would be picked up by that.
It would that would be priority level lower.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I can't really sit here and figure out, 500 and 600, 800,000, whatever. It doesn't, none of that makes sense. 1,000 just seems like it's awfully wide.
Well, that map helps a lot.
Somebody puts thought into that.
Hmm.
It'd be nice to know what their rationale was for the 1,000.
And yeah, that concludes, I'll stop sharing now, so that I do have a fair bit of feedback, I'll compile that and I'll pass that on and copy that back.
So has the council actually talked about these amendments yet? Or that's going to be their first discussion of them?
We at one of our second meeting in May, we kind of did a first look through the ordinance. Right. And then we're gonna have a second look at tomorrow's work session and kind of bring in the tree board's feedback. Realize I've taken up a lot of your time with this.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I will turn it back to you for the rest of the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else we want to add or talk about this? And we started off talking about priorities for how to reforest following as mitigation. And our conversation, tenor of that conversation is really pretty much in line with what Larry just presented as what they're doing for Jordan. So should we leave that prioritization up to ordinance of the city council with the feedback we just offered. Then if we want to do anything, it would be in identifying neighborhoods or city properties, the sort of things that we've done a little bit of so far. I'm just, I guess I'm not sure what more we can add beyond what it's already in that proposed ordinance, which has that prioritization built in.
Yeah, I think it's basically fine. I think we may at some point choose to modify the preferred areas. I mean, 2 years down the road, we may look at things that we figured out, filling the hills up there. We also give priority to that area, something like that. But as long as it's not written in the ordinance, the area, 155th Street, 175th Street, here, priority area, we would have the flexibility to do that.
And if we put out an open call for people to have trees planted, if we don't get much of a response, then we could go do more targeted
So I think
pursue it in a neighborhood.
I think that's a good idea. Anyway. There's nothing in the ordinance saying we have to go. I think it's a great idea. It's part of, this is a cool opportunity. Yeah, for your neighborhood.
We could almost do door-to-door canvassing.
Good. Good.
Trees that we planted up on 39, 38, 37, and then the cross streets was 162nd, 165th. How did you pull in those people to plant on that? That's city property where you guys
That
planted.
was before any of us were on the tree board, but I think my recollection of it is that they just put out an announcement to all the homeowners that would any of you like to have a tree in the planting strip between the sidewalk and the street in front of your house? And
I think there was a planning board member.
yeah, I think that's right.
Yes.
Let's go.
They did, and the only thing that we know, there's no irrigation on the city, on those sidewalks,
yeah.
and so a lot of them have died.
There was a big effort with water tanks.
They tried, but.
Like somebody has to fill those water bags.
That's right.
You know, I put a water bag on the one we planted up on Horizon View as our Arbor Day event.
Some of the big.
But the parks has said that they don't have the capacity to refill it. So I've been hauling a 6-gallon water jug that I fill at my house up to the park, carry it over there and fill that one. So that's not a long-term solution.
Varies by how active the homeowners and they get involved. Hopefully 6 or 8 years you'll live anymore.
No, I think 1 year will be good, but it probably should be done for this summer. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We can summer which
I do have one question that you just brought up that I don't know if I've heard of is do we have anything that will mitigate lack of follow through for if we have major change and then they plant and then 3 years of maintenance and then they don't maintain the trees?
Who are the they you're asking about? Is this Sound Transit plantings or just general?
Sound Transit and anyone else like that who does a major change in the right of way?
Yeah, there is a section that says there's a 3-year maintenance and monitoring plan. And any trees that die in those 3 years need to be replaced by the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
I think Sandy's question is what about after those 3 years?
After
After 3 years, I think.
After that, if it's in someone's yard, it's the homeowner's responsibility. If it's in cities right of way, it would become the city's. So the applicant would be responsible for the first 3 years until the tree gets fully integrated. And then at that point, it would be just like any other tree in the city.
But I think we also got involved with a tree that's in somebody's yard. Sounds transit or King County, everything. Probably not gonna go around weekly, monthly, see if they're wet.
Yeah, the replacement part was the part that I didn't recall. So thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, Larry.
Thank you.
I think that's where education is gonna be critical, and any of these where we enable homeowners to have trees planted. It'll be incumbent on us to get the education of those homeowners about how to properly care for those trees.
And, you know, if they're asking for it, they're applying for the tree, hopefully they want it.
You know, the neighborhood that I was driving in this week, you know, even though there's a lot of open space, there still are trees. Most of those people have a tree here or there in their yard. And they're alive, you know, someone planted them at some point, kept them alive long enough to get reestablished. If there's nothing else on that, is there any other old business? I don't have anything else. Under new business, I would just, this is more of an announcement of new business, is that I've started working on revising another one of the tree walks. One that's right over here, we start right here in the parking lot. It's over north of us. It's a really neat neighborhood. I had never spent much time walking there. So,
which of this, you've done some of those walks already.
so there's 4 in that booklet, and 2 of them we have redone with photos, color photos, made them as PDF format, and they're on the city website, so anybody can download them in their smartphone or something as they're doing the walk, and then they see pictures of the tree. In that booklet, they're just descriptions of the tree. If you aren't a pretty good botanist or horticulturist to begin with, you might scratch your head and say, I don't know which tree this is supposed to be. So the idea is that people can walk around and see the picture and say, oh, there's that tree.
Here, I thought that was just one of those ideas that I talked about, never happened.
Oh, so look, we've done the one with Horizon View, and we've done the one that starts over here by Starbucks and goes up to the Sheridan Heights.
Did you have any contact with David yet?
So I did the Horizon View one by myself with Julia Van helped me with that, and David and I did the Sheridan Heights one. And he gave me some input on the one here in the council area. And I'll probably get back in there about the editing on that before we finish. Great. So that's 3 of the 4, and then the 4th one. I've been trying to do 1 a year. That's good. And there's a lot changed. I mean, it existed in, what, it was 2008 or 9 or whatever that was done. So it's 15 years, but some trees are no longer there. Some trees have gotten way bigger than they were said in that tree. Original tree walk. There's some other interesting ones that I've added that weren't in the original one. But David did a really good job on that initially, especially his discussion of the history of like horse farming and some of the other things. Reports and announcements.
I have a monthly report.
This ordinance that is available online.
The ordinance that we were discussing. Yep, if you go on the city's website, if you look at the agenda for tomorrow's, it's the work session. There's a 40 or so page PDF package. The ordinance is inside that. And it's actually that the PDF that I was screen sharing was the one that you can download for yourself. If you skip the city's website, cityoflfp.gov, go to the very bottom, there's a link that's agendas and minutes. And then you can kind of follow that through to the June 8th work session.
Okay. Of course, you're giving trees, trees that are trees for developing.
Some animals that are yeah.
Yes, she will not, and she also talks to Steve about that.
What?
I would talk to them about it.
Is there a way that we can go in to see what the permit is?
You can submit a vote records request.
I know.
Excuse me for feeling a little bit, with the tree plan. Part of our mission is to advise and the city on
And
tree
you're
related.
welcome to ask, Director Bennett, about that, but I know it was discussed. Addresses would be put. Addresses would be put on the.
My experience, they require to see a different application than you can sponsor.
I guess part of the problem is this is a public record. It used to be in the past, it has been. And yeah, some things we said, they're not telling everybody in the city that somebody wants to take out.
Or I can bring your yard. I mean, I can ask about.
I used to often go sit down with Google Earth and the handout that we used to get. And sort of look through the properties, look for where these trees were being taken
Yeah.
out.
But I can ask,
So I'd like to look at. Just out of curiosity, let me know.
So I don't suppose, Riley, you know anything about this topic, but.
most of these are handled by. Yeah, I can certainly ask.
And the fact that the public does come to our meetings occasionally to address issues with permits that are happening in their neighborhood. And we don't have the information about the tree removal permits. That seems to be.
I got the general understanding that it's, well, I don't know, I can't speak for Hannah, but I mean, she's going out to all these sites, she's doing her due diligence. So, I'll ask. Yep.
We'll do that. Larry, did you have anything else from council report? That's all the great information you gave us.
I think I've talked enough. Since I kind of liaison rather than a member of.
Right.
I mean, really, the two big things the city's working on are retaining walls or the city council's working on retaining walls and tree ordinance. That's real. We've had quite a few recent meetings about the retaining walls and hope to finish that by the end of June.
Any other announcements anybody has? Okay, agenda for next meetings. Anybody have any agenda items they would like to see? The agenda for next week, next month. You don't think of them now, but do before then send them to me or to Riley.
We have any outreach activities been discussed for the summer? Maybe parks or
No,
those kind of things.
you know, we did something not last fall, but the fall before, and with the fall, with the farmers market. It was really successful, I thought. Yeah. And we didn't get around to doing that this last fall.
Well, let's see. Yeah, people talking about it.
Yeah.
So, farmers market goes in October.
Yeah, and I think the way it came out last time was that towards the end of the farmers market, foods come available. So the first people organize the farmers market were offering foods to various community groups as opportunity to fill the space.
Were there materials, for example, used last time? Still need appropriate.
We had some materials that we gave out. The two things that were really, I thought, the most popular were one, we had gotten some Douglas fir seedlings that we were just giving away from state nursery. And
It goes up.
uh,
I think,
that's right. Up here. And then, on Lake, on her name, the woman who was the arborist, that's all right. Yes.
No, Laura was an actually.
Ashley spent basically, 4 hours there answering questions. And that was really helpful. Sandy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so we do have an outreach plan. It's actually on the website and includes things like the farmers market, a couple of mailers, some flyers for handout, as well as a social media presence, newsletters, and then and things like that. So just felt, yeah, we have like a lot going on. Marty's been working on some things and I've been working on some things. Just, it's an off month, if you will. So one of the things that I was looking at doing was the second version of a handout that included a bit more about permits, why you would want to submit one and how to submit one. So that's one thing that we've got going. I think most of it was covered last month, or yes, I think most of it was covered last month.
We did agree that we had an hour day.
Would that be a topic, Sandy, where Marty was discussing next time?
I unfortunately can't 100% hear you guys. What was the question?
Yeah, reasonable topic for our next meeting, for the agenda, to get an update.
Yeah, I think in a
We haven't really done. It's been a little steady drip, but we really, it might be good to have a whole section of being focused on it.
So I just did some sleuthing. I went to the city's online permitting system. And you can search for tree permits, so I'm able to find the addresses that's publicly available information.
Okay.
So if anyone with Google can find it, it seems like. So that,
Look it up and present it.
I just said, show me all the tree permits. And it gave me a list of all the active tree permits, of which like 0052, 0053, et cetera.
Great.
Okay.
Next month.
Well, it would be nice to have it on the report that we get. Okay, do I ever move to adjourn? Riley's been keeping us apprised of the timing and we're about out of it. Second, all in favor of adjourn? All right, thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you visitors for coming. Once I walk in that trail.